And we begin tonight with what might be the worst pick in the worst cabinet in U.S. history. Continuing his breakneck pace of unqualified yet theatrical cabinet nominations, Donald Trump rolled out perhaps his most bonkers one this weekend. Kash Patel, the conspiracy theorist who even William Barr, the cover-up general, thought was too unhinged to name to a deputy job in the AG's office. The middling lawyer who, after graduating with a law degree from Pace University, was denied jobs at a series of law firms and wound up as a public defender in Miami instead. Good, honorable work. But then wound up as a staffer to Republican congressman and longtime Trump lackey Devin Nunes, you know, the guy who famously sued a fictional cow for making fun of him on Twitter and served as a bagman for Donald Trump on the Hill before taking the helm at Trump's social media grift Truth Social. That guy's former deputy Kash Patel, who was offered immunity to testify about Trump's hoarding of classified documents at Mar-a-Lago after leaving office. That guy is Trump's choice to be the new director of the FBI. Now, if you're familiar with the manosphere and MAGA media universe, you'll recognize Patel as one of the players who floated the conspiracy that it was the FBI who really did January 6th in order to frame MAGA supporters so they would take the blame. He has pitched the stolen election conspiracy, the conspiracy that the deep state falsely targeted Trump for taking those national security documents home to his bathroom and ballroom, and he has pushed the QAnon conspiracy theory, too. He also helped produce the cringeworthy version of the national anthem performed by a choir of jailed January 6th insurrectionists that Trump played at a number of his campaign rallies. Patel is such a dedicated Trump lackey. He even wrote a children's book called The Plot Against the King, about a king named Donald Trump, of course, which is described this way on Amazon.com, and I quote, "A fantastical retelling of Hillary's horrible plot against Trump to the whole family, full of fake heralds and Keeper Comey's spying slugs. This is a story of daring and danger, but never fear. Kash, the distinguished discoverer, will win the day." Charming. Here's Kash Patel on Steve Bannon's podcast, threatening to use federal law enforcement to go after the media.
We will go out and find the conspirators, not just in government, but in the media. Yes, we're going to come after the people in the media who lied about American citizens, who helped Joe Biden rig presidential elections. We're going to come after you. Whether it's criminally or civilly, we'll figure that out. But yeah, we're putting you all on notice.
Okay. And, you know, that podcast piece is actually kind of key here. In his first administration, the vibe Trump wanted was generals. Four-star Marine generals John Kelly and James Mad Dog Mattis for Chief of Staff and Defense. He liked the nickname Mad Dog. And four-star Army General Mark Milley for Joint Chiefs Chair. He called them my generals, and he bragged that they came from central casting. Though he's probably changed his mind a bit since Generals Kelly and Milley have labeled him a fascist to the core. He threw in a bunch of super-rich CEOs, Wilbur Ross and Rex Tillerson, a modern-day version of an old Dixiecrat sheriff for Attorney General Jefferson Beauregard Sessions before firing him for cover-up General Barr, a brown lady at the UN, and a famous black-eyed HUD, since that's where the projects are. And voila! Cabinet. But the big branding theme was generals. This time around, though, if you want a through line to the people Trump wants around him, look to the right-wing podcasts and other conservative media, all heavily funded by right-wing billionaires, of course. Here's Trump's pick for Director of National Intelligence, conspiracy theorist Tulsi Gabbard on the Sean Ryan Show podcast. She's a fixture of the right-wing podosphere. Here's RFK Jr., Trump's pick for Health and Human Services Secretary, on the Ben Shapiro podcast. But he also hosts his own, where he lets forth with his unique Nepo rich guy brand of medical and other conspiracy theories for which he has no scientific training. Also, his wife's an actress. I'm sure Trump loves that. Linda McMahon comes from the WWE, which is key, given Trump's long ties to the wrestling organization and its founder, Linda's husband, Vince, who is under federal investigation. They are both being sued for failing to prevent sexual abuse of teenage workers at WWE. Pete Hegseth, Trump's defense secretary pick, could be seen on Fox weekends. Also a fixture on Fox is Trump's pick for Surgeon General, Dr. Jeanette Nesheiwat. Then there's Dr. Oz, who had a TV show and came from the TV world of Oprah Winfrey. And both of Trump's AG picks failed nominee and former Florida Congressman Matt Gaetz, who stepped down amid allegations of sex trafficking a teenage girl, which he denies, and current nominee and former Florida AG Pam Bondi, accused of taking a $25,000 bribe from Trump for her election PAC, are frequent fixtures on Fox, Newsmax, and OANN. Even J.D. Vance rose to prominence on the right by appearing on Bannon's and other right-wing podcasts. Now, normally, when a president fills a cabinet, media types like moi have to scramble to figure out who they are. In this case, Trump is picking people who are already familiar to his base. The right-wing media ecosphere is how Trump squeaked back into office, keeping its fans, especially the so-called manosphere, happy and entertained by people they inherently trust because they're in their ear or on their phone or on their TV all the time, is how he will keep his base's amygdalas satiated, whether or not he keeps his ghoulish promises and provides public entertainments like mass deportations, caged children, journalists and impure Republicans and recalcitrant Democrats hauled off to show trials and the army marching through the streets of blue cities. The revolution against democracy will be podcast, posted, and televised. His unelected bureaucrat billionaire boys club, efficiency czars Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, even plan to launch a special podcast just to keep their fans on X Twitter informed on all the civil servants they fire and services they cut. No telling how transparent they'll be on the pod about what federal contracts they ensure are awarded to themselves. Yes, these cabinet picks seem crazy to normal people who are used to normal politics, but Trump isn't filling a cabinet. He's casting a reality show. Call it The Apprentice federal government. And the competition will be which of these sideshow bobs can break their federal department first, while purging the government of all but Trump loyalists and turning each agency upside down like a piggy bank and shaking the federal dollars into their own and Donald Trump's pockets. How do you loot America and get a third of the country to cheer for you, a third to be too scared to fight you, and the final third to tune out entirely? Easy. You put on a freak show. Joining me now is Glenn Kirshner, MSNBC legal analyst and former federal prosecutor. Olivia Troy, former Homeland Security and counterterrorism advisor to former Vice President Mike Pence. And Hugo Lowell, political investigations reporter for The Guardian. Thank you all for being here. Glenn, I do want to get your first take on the Kash Patel nomination as somebody who worked in the DOJ.
And I worked with a lot of good FBI agents, the men and women of law enforcement over the years. And I'll tell you, Joy, when I see clips of Kash Patel saying things like, you know what, we're going to go after people who helped Joe Biden rig the election, and we're going to go after them, I don't know, criminally, civilly, we'll come up with something. First of all, to me, that sounds disqualifying. And if you have a Senate that cares about their advice and consent responsibilities, they will refuse to confirm a guy like Kash Patel. But here's the other thing. He is going to have to enlist lots of people if he wants to vindictively go after Donald Trump's announced enemies. He's going to need corrupt prosecutors. He's going to need to pull the wool over the eyes of grand jurors who are to sit and assess the evidence. He's going to have to convince judges to go along with his sham investigations and prosecutions. He's going to be blocked every step of the way. Now, that's little consolation to the people whose lives he will upend going through these sham investigations for crimes that we all know weren't even committed because Joe Biden didn't try to steal an election. So listen, he has an uphill battle, I think, to be confirmed. And it would be even worse for him if he gets in to be the director of the FBI, because I believe he will have the good men and women of law enforcement bucking him every step of the way.
Well, that's a big if. If the part where you said about if you had a Senate that had the care for the American system and democracy to stop him, let me play a few of them. Here's some senators, Republican senators, reacting to the nomination.
I think Kash Patel is a very strong nominee. I think Kash Patel is going to be confirmed by the Senate. You look at his background. He has a serious professional background.
Kash Patel has more experience than just about anybody coming into this position. He has a well-rounded background. I look forward to supporting him and pushing this nomination across the finish line.
There are serious problems at the FBI. The American public knows it. They expect to see sweeping change, and Kash Patel is just the type of person to do it.
It doesn't surprise me that he will pick people that he believes are very loyal to himself, and that's been a part of the process.
You can almost smell the fear, Olivia, and you've seen people begin to capitulate in advance. They're running scared because they now know that, first of all, there are no senators who are going to have the cojones to stop him. He will get through. And then he can unleash Donald Trump's vindictiveness on whoever he wants. I want to just point you to the enemies list. I was fairly surprised, honestly, and thankful that your name was not on it, my friend. But the names on the hit list that Kash Patel published in his book called Government Gangsters, he mentioned a bunch of people who work for Donald Trump. He mentioned the current defense secretary who works for under Biden, Lloyd Austin. He mentioned William Barr, the cover-up general, John Bolton, who worked national security advisor under Trump, John Brennan, the former CIA director under Obama, Pat Cipollone, former White House counsel, who you know very well, who testified against Donald Trump in the January 6th committee. He mentioned Hillary Clinton, Merrick Garland, Kamala Harris, Eric Holder, Andrew McCabe, Mark Milley, Peter Strzok. I could go on. Robert Mueller, of course, is on the enemies list. Mark Esper, the former defense secretary, who's the one who told Trump, you cannot shoot citizens in the leg, sir. You can't do it. He's on the enemies list. Cassidy Hutchinson, the brave young woman who you also know, who bravely, but braver than anybody that testified in the January 6th committee, she's on the list. So those senators are probably scared to death of getting on the list as well.